More than 850 wildfires are burning across Canada right now. More than 700 of them out of control. The smoke has crossed into the United States, triggering air quality alerts across at least 18 states and affecting an estimated 100 million people from Minnesota to Virginia. In northwestern Ontario alone, more than 180 fires are burning. One of them has already destroyed an entire First Nation community. The season is still accelerating. This is one of the worst wildfire crises Canada has faced since 2023, when 18.5 million hectares burned in the most destructive wildfire year in Canadian history. The 2026 season started slowly. As recently as early July, the total area burned stood at 1.18 million hectares, about 61% of the 10-year average. Within a single week, that changed. By July 13th, the total had reached approximately 1.4 million hectares, 134% of the 10-year average. By mid-July, multiple reports put the figure closer to 1.9 million hectares, roughly 4.7 million acres. A below-average season had become a national emergency. The center of the crisis is northwestern Ontario, north of Thunder Bay. On July 13th, fires across the region expanded rapidly. A single fire complex near the town of Armstrong grew to more than 350,000 hectares by July 16th, according to Canada's National Observer. That is an area larger than the state of Rhode Island. The Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources reported 136 active fires in the northwest region, with 63 of them completely out of control, and another 44 fires burning in the northeast. Collins First Nation, also known as Namagusa-Sagagan, was inside that fire zone. A fast-moving wildfire hit the community on approximately July 13th. According to community leadership, more than 30 homes and a school were burned. The community was, in their words, reduced to ashes. Only about 24 people were present at the time. They escaped using a handful of boats across the lake. There was no government evacuation order. Community leadership told the National Observer and APTN that residents were evacuated without warning from any ministry or assistance from anyone. The fire moved through in less than an hour, a speed consistent with crown fire behavior in boreal spruce fir forest, where drought-stressed trees ignite rapidly and fire spreads through the canopy. Collins was not the only community affected. Evacuation orders were also issued for Armstrong, Whitsun First Nation, Gull Bay First Nation, Lac des Mille Lacs First Nation, Lac La Croix First Nation, Cat Lake First Nation, and McDowell Lake First Nation. As of July 15th, the Ontario government estimated that more than 1,600 First Nations residents had been displaced by wildfires this season. Evacuees were initially relocated to Thunder Bay, but when accommodations there reached capacity, some were transported to Toronto. Several of the affected communities are fly-in only, inaccessible by road, and some lost telecommunications entirely, complicating evacuation coordination. Highway 527 northbound at Gull Bay First Nation and Highway 599 are both closed. Wabakimi Provincial Park has been shut down. On July 13th, 3 CN rail freight trains were halted on their tracks near Armstrong when fires surrounded the rail line. Video captured by a crew member was broadcast widely, showing flames through the train windows. In the footage, a crew member says, "We are encased in flames now." The crew was safely evacuated overnight. CN Rail suspended operations in the area. Uni4, the union representing rail workers, criticized CN for sending trains into a zone where fires had been burning for 5 weeks. Northwestern Ontario is not the only active front. Earlier in the season, fires burned across multiple provinces. In Saskatchewan, the Lobstick Fire near Shellbrook began on May 25th and crossed the North Saskatchewan River by May 29th. An evacuation alert was issued on May 30th. The fire burned approximately 19,000 hectares, about 47,000 acres, and is estimated to have caused 20 to 25 million Canadian dollars in timber losses. In Ontario, the Timmins 9 fire in late May forced the evacuation of more than 160 residents from Matagami First Nation, before being brought under control by mid-June. In British Columbia, The Calamo Park fire in West Kelowna on June 16 forced the evacuation of 357 properties, about 800 people, though no homes were lost. That fire was caused by a prohibited campfire. In the Northwest Territories, Fort Simpson was placed under a full evacuation order on June 28 due to wildfire FS009, and the nearby community of Wrigley was evacuated the following day. Evacuees were relocated to Yellowknife, where the multiplex arena served as a reception and lodging center. Near Fort Simpson, on June 24, a Buffalo Airways Turbo Commander 690 aircraft crashed during firefighting operations, killing the pilot and 2 firefighters on board. The plane went down approximately 50 kilometers from the community. A preliminary investigation by the Transportation Safety Board found evidence of in-flight structural breakup. The left wing and tail section had separated from the aircraft mid-air. The investigation itself was disrupted when the same wildfires forced the evacuation of Fort Simpson, preventing investigators from accessing the crash site. In total, 4 people have died in connection with Canada's 2026 wildfire season. 3 were aboard the Buffalo Airways aircraft. The 4th was a 40-year-old firefighter who died from a sudden medical emergency while battling the Mosquel fire in Annapolis County, Nova Scotia, on May 21. The fires have also crossed into the United States. Along the border in northern Minnesota, wildfires ignited on both sides of the line in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. The largest Canadian fire near the border covered more than 70,600 acres. The largest fire on the Minnesota side reached 13,500 acres. On July 14, the entire Boundary Waters Canoe area was closed and evacuated, only the second full closure in recent history. The last was during the Greenwood Fire in 2021. Approximately 400 firefighters were deployed to battle 15 active fires in the area, with another 100 in support roles. For the tens of millions of people nowhere near a fire line, the most direct impact is the smoke. Prevailing winds have carried smoke plumes from northwestern Ontario southeast across southern Ontario, Quebec, the U.S. Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, and the Mid-Atlantic. On July 14, the NOAA-21 satellite captured the plume using its VIIRS instrument, the Visible Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite. The image, published by NASA's Earth Observatory, showed smoke pouring eastward across the continent. On July 15, Toronto ranked as the city with the worst air quality of any major city on Earth, according to IQ Air. On July 16, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, recorded an Air Quality Index, or AQI, reading of 644. That is the worst in the city's recorded history, more than double the previous record of 300, which had stood since 1987. The same day, Detroit, Michigan, registered an AQI of approximately 570 to 600. The United States Environmental Protection Agency's AQI scale maxes out at 500. The hazardous threshold begins at 301. Both cities recorded readings that exceeded the scale entirely. Milwaukee suspended some city services in response. As of July 17, air quality alerts remain active across at least 18 U.S. states, from Minnesota to New Hampshire to Virginia, according to ABC News. Between 2020 and 2024, wildfire smoke was responsible for an average of 1,400 deaths per year in Canada, primarily from cardiovascular and respiratory complications in communities far from any active fire. In June 2023, a single week of wildfire smoke cost Ontario more than 1.2 billion Canadian dollars in health system impacts. The current smoke event matches or exceeds that week in both population exposure and AQI severity. The conditions behind this crisis are well documented. Environment and Climate Change Canada has forecast above-average temperatures across most of the country through July and August. Multi-year drought conditions persist, particularly across Western Canada, and snowpack across northern Canada has been declining for decades. According to experts cited by CBS News, high temperatures triggered premature snowmelt this year, giving the terrain an extra month to dry out before fire season began. Less snowmelt means less moisture reaching downstream soil, and vegetation dries out faster and ignites more easily. In boreal forests dominated by spruce and fir, the combination of dry fuel, high heat, and wind creates the conditions for the kind of rapid fire spread that destroyed Collins First Nation. On the response side, the federal government directed $316.7 million Canadian dollars over 5 years through Budget 2025 to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, known as CIFFC, to build national aerial firefighting capacity. For the 2026 season, CIFFC leased 10 firefighting aircraft and 2 support assets, including 4 air tankers, 1 Bird Dog aircraft, and 5 heavy-lift helicopters. Ontario Premier Doug Ford stated on July 16 that more than 150 fire crews and nearly 50 firefighting aircraft are working around the clock across northern Ontario. But the response has drawn criticism. The Chiefs of Ontario called for immediate government action, demanding direct collaboration with First Nations leadership and adequate resources for communities on the fire line. Darian Baskatawong, senior advisor at Whiteson First Nation, told Canada's National Observer that the province stepped up way too late. According to Baskatawong, throughout the day before Collins was destroyed, the province told Whites and that the smoke was coming from more distant fires and posed no immediate threat. Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources acknowledged that officials didn't see the fire that destroyed Collins until it was too late, citing the strain of managing many fires at once. Ontario's 2026 wildfire budget of $150 million Canadian dollars was less than the province spent in either of the 2 previous years, when spending was approximately double that amount. On July 16, Ontario formally requested federal assistance and the potential deployment of the Canadian Armed Forces. Defence Minister David McGuinty confirmed on July 17 that the military is on standby, though no formal deployment request has been received. As of July 17, more than 850 wildfires are burning across Canada. More than 700 remain out of control. 15 northern Ontario communities have either started or are considering evacuations. Fire danger is forecast to remain highest across the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, northern Manitoba, and areas surrounding Hudson Bay, with elevated risk in northern Ontario and Quebec. The smoke is expected to continue affecting the U.S. Midwest, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic through at least July 18. Environment and Climate Change Canada's forecasts point to above-average temperatures and dry conditions persisting through August. The fires are not slowing. The smoke is not clearing. And the communities inside the fire zone, many of them Indigenous, many of them remote, many of them reachable only by air, are still waiting for help. Subscribe.